Hey guys, it's me, Dr. Leith. Nah, I'm just playing. It's me. I'm Dr. Leith. That's my daughters. So I'm recording this for the trauma class, and I hope everybody is doing well. I wish we had class because I would love to talk about the Jim Hopper video with each of you. Last week I went over psychoeducation, and hopefully the Jim Hopper video helps give you some information that you can share with your clients about why they may have reacted the way they did during the trauma experience, whether it was fight, flight, freeze, or acquiesce. The difficulty with memories, right? Because if that person goes and files a police report and they say that the detectives kept asking me questions and I can't remember everything, and some people are saying if I can't remember, it must not have happened, and things like that. There's a lot of neurological stuff that happens, and a lot of biological stuff that happens during a trauma experience that leads to the behaviors and the outcomes that happen. And so, arming your client with that information and saying, no, you not fighting back doesn't mean that you were a willing participant or going and giving consent. That's a really animal instinct. Maybe he would have left you alone if you had gone limp. Fighting back, it wasn't a choice, right? That wasn't a decision that you made. So that's why I wanted you to see that, so that way you can communicate that information with your client to take some of that stigma and that pressure off. It's already bad enough that there was trauma and they're maybe dealing with some post-traumatic stuff, but on top of it, it's even worse if they're blaming themselves, saying, I should have done this. People say, if it was serious, this would have happened. That's not helping them at all, right? So that's the purpose of understanding the biology and the neurobiological stuff behind it. And it also feeds into what happens with triggers, right? So before we go further in, I want to wish everybody well, express my gratitude for your continued patience and your support. Um, I really want you all to feel comfortable emailing me with questions and concerns, whether it's now in the course or later on, because this was a crazy situation that no one anticipated. So later on down the road, you have questions, email me, right? I'll still be around. Now you're going to get rid of me. I'll still be around. Let me know your questions. Let me help you. You're going to be my peers in the future. So feel free to lean into me to ask for help and let me know. And if I don't know the answer, I'll help you find it. I'll give you some resources and things like that. But please know that, a big part of the experience of this course was taken from us, for very good reasons. Those decisions were not made lightly in the least. But I don't want you leaving the semester or moving on feeling like, oh man, I don't know what to do with trauma stuff now. Ask me, come to me, let me know what you need so that I can help you. Okay, now or in the future. In other news, look what I can do now. Oh, it's not even working. Oh, look at that, right? Really stepping up my YouTube game. So we went over psychoeducation. In my opinion, starting with education is great. I want to remove self doubt from my clients. I want to reduce shame, reduce stigma, right? Get them to understand that what happened was not a character thing, it was an invalidating experience. You didn't ask for it, you didn't deserve it. All that stuff, whether it is an act of violence or a natural disaster, things like that. So now we're moving into affect regulation and distress tolerance. So, in other words, dealing with the emotions and dealing with intense situations. And both of these, although this is not a DBT lecture, these are both tenets of DBT, but you would also see them, you would still focus on this probably for a number of different modalities. So, affect regulation. You might also see this more commonly known as emotion regulation. I often refer to it as emotion regulation. So it's managing your emotions. It is a technique that's used for a variety of things, not just for trauma, but for this discussion, we're going to hone in on trauma. And the goal is to prevent and manage intense emotions. And this is something you would explain to them, right? So if you're my client, I might say, what I want to focus on today is emotion regulation, right? And how we manage feelings and emotions and things like that. So laying it out for them. So what do you do in session with this? First thing is helping identify emotions. And this is really cool. You can do this in session with them, right? So it's not just like when you're in grade school and it's like, here's Mark and Mark's toy broke. How does Mark feel, right? Where you're kind of giving them assignments. When you're talking about what happened, right? You might ask them, so tell me about the experience, or tell me about your relationships now or before, whatever it is. Have them give a feeling word, and that's usually my first salvo. That's my first attack. Is give me a feeling word, right? How did that feel? Or what do you feel talking about it? What did you feel in that moment? And I really emphasize this, give me a feeling word. I'm betting you that if you do this most of the time, most of your clients will go on with a thought and they'll say, well, it really sucked, or I didn't like it. And you'll notice they're responding to the question, but they're not giving you a feeling word. And sometimes that's just how they communicate. It's not anything more or less than that. But sometimes it's, I don't know how I feel. And it's either A, I haven't slowed down enough to uh, determine the feeling. In which case it's like, hey, let's take a breath, walk them through, right? Let's do some breathing stuff and let's try and label it. And the other thing is that it might be, I have the feeling, but I don't know what it's called, right? I have a difficult time articulating this. Now, this happens most notably with men. It happens a lot with men, but not only with men. This concept is known as alexithymia or alexithymia, right? And so it's having the feeling, they're not without feeling, but I have a hard time articulating what that is. And so where we come in is we might help them label that feeling, right? And the long-term goal for this is that I want them to be able to do this on their own outside of session. Other things that we might do is as we're talking about it, and I say, maybe you're working with a survivor who they went through whatever legal process or an academic process like Title IX, and they get the outcome, and you say, how do you feel about that, or what do you feel, and they don't know, you might kind of read them in session and say, well, it seems like you are pretty frustrated. It seems like you feel relieved, right? So you're playing detective, right? You're presenting to them, reflecting, right? Your basic attending skills, reflecting back to them what they're feeling, right? And we want them to get in tune with those feelings. Now, part of this process, aside from just the basic, here's all the different feelings one can have, and that can be kind of a time suck because emotions get really complex, and then when they're combining and things like that. But for little ones, for teens and children, it might be really helpful, especially if you have one of those charts with all the different faces and it has the labels underneath. That can be great. But other things to do, especially for adults, is teaching relaxation techniques, because the feelings can get overwhelming, right? And so that's what we're talking about. The feelings get really overwhelming, and they start either getting overwhelmed, they start shutting down, putting my phone on silent, and they get lost in the maelstrom that is all the feelings and stuff. So we need to slow it down. We got to take it down a little bit, right? And that's really hard. Think of your own experiences when you've got caught up in feelings, right? And it's something we can all relate to. So emotion regulation, we're going to calm it down a little bit, right? We don't want to invalidate or minimize. We just want them to be in control. So 2 techniques I'm going to go over today are progressive muscle relaxation and mindfulness breathing-based training. So progressive muscle relaxation, some of you are familiar with this. And both of these things are things that you can do. I encourage you to practice them with both of them. Well, try both on yourself, and then try explaining to a friend or family member. Just have a good old time, right? So, progressive muscle relaxation. I'll post a script on Blackboard, but there's all sorts of different scripts. This is something that I don't try to memorize a whole script. I have one handy in my office to walk a person through. I'm sure you can find some on YouTube of someone reading it to you, or on Spotify and things like that. Um, and that really helps to have this. So what we're doing with this is you're either going to start at the top with the head, or you're going to start at the bottom with the feet and work your way up. But you're going to go in one direction. Don't jump all over the. Let's focus on the hands and now the knees, right? From the bottom up or top down, right? And what we do is with each muscle, we say, I want you to clench and then release, right? And we start wherever. So I might say to you, sit comfortably, sit back, close your eyes, whatever they're comfortable with. And I want you to curl your toes as tight as you can. Hold it and then release. And now I want you to point your feet away from you. I want you to tense your calves. I want you to tense your thighs and your quads and your abs. And moving up, I want you to hunch your shoulders, right? I want you to move your head. Squeeze your eyes shut, right? Raise them up. And so we're kind of doing, I'm going to use my fist just for the sake of example. So we say squeeze, release, right? And ideally, you would be explaining this in a soothing tone, right? It's probably a better word than soothing, but like you're not barking orders at them. And so they're doing that. And this is just a way to get control and relax. This is also, just as an aside, a great tool to use if you have trouble sleeping at night, right? Find a YouTube video of it, or if you can memorize it or whatever. Find a Spotify thing and listen to it. It works wonder for people who have difficulty sleeping. So this might be also something that you use with individuals who say, I just have some sleep problems. And we want to get them to a place where they feel comfortable doing it at home. And this is something I have them shop around for, not literally shop. There's tons of resources. They don't need to buy anything. But finding a narrator or a method that works for them, right? And part of this is a twofold thing. One is, they should find one that they feel comfortable with. If they're uncomfortable, it defeats the purpose. But the other part of it is they're getting control back of their life. I don't like this, and I'm not going to do it, right? That's great, right? We're moving away. It's those little things that add up. Now, the mindfulness-based breathing training, lots of different ways. I talked a little bit about this. So the takeaway from this, most critical piece of it, is learning to do the belly breathing, right? And so I've gone over this in class. If you've had me in other classes, I've done it there too. I guess this is becoming my thing slowly. So breathing deep down into their belly. I'm not going to get hung up on the timing. You can see some where they say breathe in through the nose for 3 seconds and out through the mouth for 2 seconds. Most of the time when I do it, I just say breathe all the way in and hold it until you're comfortable, and then breathe it out, right? That's how I do it. The timing, we can kind of tinker around. That's a really cool fine-tuning piece of it. But for right now, for the sake of example, let's not get lost in how long do you hold it for. So what I do, sit back a little bit, you guys get to see my awesome Infinity War shirt, is, so if you're my client, I'm going to talk to you as though we're doing telecounseling and I can't see you. So I want you to put one hand on your chest up here, just below your neck, whatever that's called, and one hand on your belly. And I want you to breathe in as deeply as you can through your nose, nice and slow. And I want you to imagine you're pulling the air from your nose all the way down to your belly, just behind your belly button. And when you breathe, your belly hand should move in and out. So when I breathe in, my belly hand goes up and it goes down, but my chest hand is staying still. It should not look like this, right? I want you to breathe all the way down. And then I practice a couple times with them, and then we do the full practice, which is I'm gonna do this with you. Let's start small. Let's go for 30 seconds, right? And I might have like one of those chime things, like the Tibetan singing bowl, like ding, and like we're just gonna go for 30 seconds. I'm here. You're safe. Remember, part of the process is assuring them that they are safe and there, and doing mindfulness based stuff can get overwhelming, so we got to remind them, and that's why we start really small. 30 seconds, 15 seconds, right? Let them have their eyes open, right? The technique right now, early on in your work with a survivor, is just getting the breathing down. Don't worry yet about timing and eyes and stuff like that. If they can learn to belly breathe, that's a victory. And so we'll walk through it, right? And then process afterwards. What was that like? Now, I really want to learn from my mistakes. When your client is doing this, especially if they're really invested, they're trying, they're willing to go outside their comfort zone, and they sit back and they get into it, right? They're breathing, you're watching, and the way you would correct them is if they, if I saw you not doing it right, I would say, and just remember, your belly hand should move, your chest hand stays still, right? Just don't stop them or anything. So I had a client, she was a survivor. We did a lot of great work. We got to this point where we're trying this, and it took a while for her to warm up to it. And I'm going to show you another technique, but for right now, she got to a point where she could be mindful and kind of let the thoughts drift, and she kind of relaxed. And my office was outside of a courtyard, and there was this very, very loud, crystal clear, sharp glass breaking, right? Like somebody dropped a huge window or something, just loud. And she's in this place of vulnerability because she's finally letting her guard down, her vulnerabilities open, and she's relaxed, and crash, right? And she's there, and it took her a good solid 10 minutes to unwind, because remember, her body pre-mindfulness, all that trauma stuff, right? All the neurobiological stuff is telling her, screaming at her, be on guard. Don't let your guard down. Don't be vulnerable. We can't have this happen again. I got to protect you. And we finally got to this place where she let it go. And she was breathing, and I'm watching her, and I'm watching her body relax, and she's breathing the right way, the way I want her to for this activity. And then what happened? She's startled, right? And it's one of those things. It was more than like if I snuck up on you and scared you. I mean, you can tell that this really affected her. And so when you're doing this, you just want to be cognizant of it. And it's things like, make sure your phone is on silent. It's the little things are the main thing. Phone on silent, muting your computer so that you're not getting email dings. Based on where you're at, sometimes this happens. People coming to your door. Are you doing this when there's construction nearby that can be heard? So you want to just be aware. And sometimes you can't control those things. You can't control if there's construction next to your office, or if someone's dropping glass and things like that. But just being prepared of what to do with this, and let's not feed into that, but be aware that doing this makes them incredibly vulnerable. But that's good, because I need the guard to go down, because when they're vulnerable, then they're able to kind of process their thoughts and feelings a little bit more. But it's really uncomfortable for them, and that's where you're working, and so are they. So mindfulness, let me use my new, So mindfulness. What is mindfulness? So mindfulness is intentionally being aware of the present moment without judgment, right? And lots of literature on mindfulness. I have a great friend at Wake Forest University, Dr. David Johnson. He's a mindfulness expert. And there's lots of reasons that mindfulness is important. There's lots of benefits that it gives. And for me, the best thing to do is that everybody has these crazy, hectic lives, right? Everybody has responsibilities. Um, the goal with mindfulness, aside from the therapeutic stuff, is that we're teaching the clients that they can do this on their own, right? That they can do it very briefly if they want. They don't have to set up like a whole hour or a whole day, right? You can do this when you're driving home. You can do this while you're cooking. There's lots of different ways, but there's lots of benefits to it. And so that's why it's important, but it's being intentionally aware. So you're choosing to do it. You're not just checking out of the present moment. So we're thinking about now, or we're focused on now, not dwelling on the past or what hasn't happened without judgment. So I'm not judging anything. I'm not saying that was awful, or that would be good, that would be nice. It just is, I'm just here, just for a moment, right? Switch back. So, when I bring up mindfulness, a couple things come up. And these are things, again, that I want you to be prepared for. There can be some resistance to it, and it's very, very common. There's nothing wrong with it. And the biggest thing I want you to know is that it's not because a person doesn't. Everybody wants to feel better, right? Nobody wants to stay in that place, but this can be scary and it can be awkward and uncomfortable. I mean, look at the experience I just gave to you, right? Like, here's this lady in my office and I'm asking her, sit back, close your eyes, and breathe deeply while I watch. It can be off-putting for a lot of people, and that's where your professionalism, your basic attending skills come in. But then there's also this other stuff. There can be quite a bit of misinformation about mindfulness in regards to spirituality. So a lot of, is that a different religious practice, or is it a religious practice, period? And it doesn't need to be. It can be as spiritual as somebody wants it to be, such as contemplative prayer and things like that. But even if someone is atheist, there does not need to be a link to spirituality or religion at all. A lot of people get hung up that yes, it did come from an Eastern culture, but that there's no religious connotation to it. And so sometimes discussing that with them, or that it's not sacrilegious, right? Just explaining what it is. I can't focus on nothing, right? Well, we're not focusing on nothing. The goal is not to be empty-headed, right? The goal is to just be focused on the present and how I'm feeling, right? What's going on around me. And that usually dovetails with this next one, that thoughts keep running through my head, which is very normal, very common, especially for people starting out with it, but even for people who do it all the time. And I'm by no means like an expert mindfulness person, but it happens to people who do it every day, right? You have these thoughts drift. I keep thinking about, am I doing it right? And this is why I stopped using the timing stuff in my sessions, because people would say, I lost count if I was breathing for 3 seconds and breathing out for 2, or was I counting too fast? I feel silly doing it, and there can be, most pertinent to our class, there can be intrusive thoughts about the trauma. So what are some solutions for this? Well, for the misinformation about it, it would be just giving some education about what it means, right? It's a non-judgmental focus on the present, right? That's it. There's no spiritual or higher beings or anything like that. I can't focus on nothing. Well, it's not that you have to focus on nothing. It's just focusing on where you're at right now. And sometimes what I'll do is introduce an anchor. And so in my office, I have an air conditioner, and I'll have it going. And what I'll say is just focus on the hum of this, right? Just focus on the hum of the air conditioner or whatever it might be. And, I might pull up a video or a soundtrack of, birds chirping or a river or something like that, and ask them just focus on that. And then what comes up is, but I keep having all these other thoughts come up, like I need to remember to fill up my car with gas. I need to return the red box. I need to go food shopping, things like that. And so what I thought was a really beautiful description of this is to think of your thoughts like leaves on a river, and you see the leaves coming, and you acknowledge them, and then you let them go, right? So someone says they're practicing, they have their eyes shut, they're breathing, they're doing the whole thing, and then the thought comes, I need to return the red box. And what you're supposed to do is acknowledge, okay, I'm not being mindful, or I'm having a thought, and table it, move it aside, let it go. What I will tell people is, because a lot of people will say things like, but I have so much stuff to do, and it's also important, and it's also critical. Let's not get lost in, like, is it really that important? It's important. So I want you to imagine a shelf in your mind. And when you have a thought, I want you to put that thought on the shelf. Because a lot of people, I noticed when I gave the river analogy, people would say, but then I feel like I'm disregarding it, I'm minimizing it, and I'm going to forget it. And so what I found was, well, if I say things like acknowledge it and validate it, yeah, I need to return the red box, and I'm going to put it on my shelf, and I'll get back to it when I'm done. Because it's going to be there, right? It's not like you need to return it right now, right this second, like you're going to leave our session to go do it. So what if you just kind of put a pin in it and just wait? And that seemed that everybody kind of got behind that idea of acknowledging it and tabling it for later. Thinking about if I'm doing it right, that one's tough. What I just say is, look, only thing you got to do is breathe into your belly hand, right? As long as your belly hand is moving, you're doing it right. That's all it is, and I'm here, and I'll let you know if something needs to change, right? Take the pressure off of them. I feel silly. Well, yeah, if you've never done it. When I started, I felt silly. I feel silly demonstrating it, especially by myself in my office with my son next door. And so, just that's it. But would you rather feel silly, or do you want to keep feeling the way that you do? Right? Because for me, and that sounds a little power over, I'll admit, I really think that this will help. And I think there's a benefit to this. I think it's going to be a critical step. It's a critical skill in working through this trauma, getting the emotions under control and things like that. So here's the discomfort. Here's the silliness. Where do you want to go? Let's go through it. And you don't have to. Who's watching you? You feel silly. You feel ashamed, but who's watching, right? You're doing it here with me to make sure you're doing it right. And then you can do it in the privacy of your own home. Now, the big one is the intrusive thoughts about the trauma. Now, remember from last week, your body, after a traumatic event, is trying to rectify what happened. It's trying to reconcile these thoughts and experiences and feelings. And when you lower the guard, as that vulnerability goes up, those intrusive thoughts start popping in. Very, very common. And when it's in session, as uncomfortable as it is for your client, it can be a real benefit to the work we do, because now they're having the thoughts and we can process those thoughts with them. Oh, switch. Yeah. So before we go on to the other stuff, being mindful versus mindless. What's the difference, right? Well, being mindful is intentional. I'm choosing to do this. And mindless is when you're just kind of checked out. So, like, have you ever driven home? You're driving from campus maybe, and you don't know anything that happened between getting in the car and pulling into your driveway. That's mindless, right? Or when you're eating, mindful eating would be, I take the chip and I put it in my mouth and I feel the crunchiness, the saltiness, and all of that. Mindless is I just keep going, right? And I'm not really paying attention. It's the unintentional and lack of awareness that separates mindless from mindful. So, why would we focus on mindfulness? It helps reduce the intensity of emotions, right? The breathing deactivates the alarm center, or at least reduces it. Cooler heads prevail. So someone who panics, right, when they panic and they start making rash decisions, not everybody has this, but it's also, aside from trauma, having a clear head can help. We don't want you to do anything that's going to make a situation more difficult. And most importantly to our discussion today, it helps identify emotions and triggers. So, what do we do? What's the goal with all this? Why am I giving you these tools, or why are we focusing on this so much? We want to spend time practicing with our clients so that way they can do it on their own and they know when and how to do it. And as they get more acquainted with it and more confident with it, then they explore more specific mindful techniques that work for them, such as yoga or meditation and exercise, right? So we are kind of the gateway experience for this. I'm just giving you that little hit of mindfulness so that way you might go on and find what works best for you on your own. Now, identifying the emotions, right? And this is where we're going to pull from mindfulness now to focus on feelings. This is really difficult for clients, especially when they're in the throes of having an intrusive thought or intrusive feelings. So we're helping guide this process. And I say guide really intentionally because you don't ever want to say, you feel this way. You might ask, right? Like, do you feel this way, or it seems that way? But you never say, you're resentful, right? That's it, right? We want them to tell us how they feel. They're the expert. And so we're going to teach this as a process to them. So the first thing that you're going to do is identify antecedent thoughts, right? So think of that CBT, REBT process. What happened before the feeling, right? What happened? So you're feeling scared, overwhelmed, angry. What happened? Was there a thought that popped into your head, like an intrusive thought? Sometimes it can be implicit, right? So it came and it went very quickly, very subtly. They're unaware. So you might have to dig with them. Well, tell me, you went to Starbucks and what happened? Tell me what you remember, right? What did you smell the coffee? What did you hear? Things like that. So we're having to kind of dig where it came from. And we want to teach them to do that as well. Identifying the trigger. What led to the thought that led to the emotion? So what I would do is walk them through this process. What in the environment or around you or the context led to this? Was it that people were talking about a similar traumatic experience around you? Was something on the news? Did you smell a scent that reminded you? Was there a sound? What was it? Is there a memory, right? Did a memory come up? Did it come up from the environmental cue, or did it just kind of pop into your head, which does happen? What are your thoughts about the memory, right? It's bad, it's ugly, it's no good. I'm no good. I shouldn't have done that. I let this happen. I was unprepared. And so that's difficult, right? Where they're narrating to us what they're thinking about this. And then we arrive at, and how do you feel about it? Give me a feeling word about it. So working with triggers, because we got to try to identify what they are so that the client can kind of regain some control, it's really critical that a client understands that their experience was traumatic. So I want them to stop thinking, this happens to everybody, I should be over it, what's the big deal? I don't want them thinking that. I need for them to acknowledge this was traumatic, this was invalidating, and that the triggered experience is a function of that it is a post-traumatic experience. So when they feel triggered, we're teaching them to evaluate the situation for the trigger. And they say, I went out for dinner and we went to a bar and I saw on the news, they were talking about the natural disaster that I experienced and I got triggered. So what do you do now? So we want them to use an adaptive strategy. And so these are some of the things that you can use. Improving the moment, right? What can you do to cheer yourself up or to get out of that? So this is like when they're kind of pretty well into their recovery with it, what can they do to help themselves? Do they need a timeout, which is leaving? So remember at the beginning of the semester, I had said, if anybody needs to take a break and kind of leave the class, I completely understand. That's a timeout. So it's like, I can't do this right now. I'm going to splash some water on my face. I'm going to go get some water, go for a walk, whatever it might be. Take a break, right? I know that I'm getting overwhelmed. I've reached my limit. Analyzing the situation. I'm safe. That was a different situation and I'm not in danger right now. We're not saying that's behind us or it's in the past. We're saying right now, mindfulness, right? In the present moment, that threat is not here and I'm okay. Utilizing their social support. Do they have someone they can talk to and say, hey, I'm having a difficult time? And that's where, for DBT, like the idea of the coaching calls comes from. These can be talked down very quickly where it's like, hey, I'm having a moment. Can you just kind of be present with me? Positive self-talk, right? The self-affirmations. I'm stronger. I know what this is. I can handle it. I'm okay. The relaxation techniques, so the mindfulness stuff. And then these last two are really more for if nothing else is working or I'm getting really amped up, distraction and urge surfing. All right, I'm going to go over those in just a second. They're really important. So distress tolerance. So this is a critical aspect for trauma work as well as DBT work. So what to do when things get bad. In this case, trying to avoid panic, fear responses, the autonomic responses, things like that. Outside of trauma, avoiding making a situation worse by overreacting or acting in a volatile way. And that brings us to the two I just mentioned, urge surfing and I said distraction, I have grounding here. Distraction would be just like it sounds. Can you get lost in something else, right? Gaming, exercise, just you're trying to kind of remove yourself from the situation, right? Urge surfing, I think is fascinating. I think it's a great tool. It's one of the first things I go over with clients. We use it a lot with people who self-harm. And so urge surfing is, okay, I want to self-harm, or I'm feeling really scared. I need to get out of here. I want to run. For bulimia, it's I want to purge, right? Binge eating, I want to binge, whatever it is, right? Urge surfing is can you ride it out, right? And so what we know is a lot of these things end in 15 to 30 minutes, right? That's the long end, is 30 minutes. Can you sort of white knuckle and distract yourself and hang tight until the urge passes, right? And once a person doesn't want, the first time is the scary time for them. Once I establish, I had this sensation and I put on my headphones and I just listened to music, I noticed that the sensation went down lower and lower, the thought went down lower and lower, and after about 12 minutes, it went away. After they get through that first time and they know, I just need to make it 10 or 15 minutes, then the next time they can remind themselves, okay, I just need to hang on for 10 to 15 minutes and it's going to pass. I just need to try to ride this out. So this is not minimizing it, and this is not the extent of your work with them or counseling or anything like this. This is sort of like when things are really bad, you can't escape or you shouldn't, like you're in a situation where this is bad. You're going for a job interview and someone reminds you of your attacker or something like that. and you really want or need this job, so you can't really run away. Urge surfing is how we kind of can we hang on in that discomfort without making a bad situation worse. Grounding, bringing yourself back to reality. So when that person has those intrusive thoughts in session with you, you did the mindfulness stuff, and you're asking them to, what's going on, give me a feeling word, and maybe they're amping up, right? This is to pull it down. We're not moving the narrative forward with counseling. If this happens in session, we want that person to feel safe. So grounding, pulling them back to reality. And I've made like little care kits for people where you put a piece of candy in it, a worry stone or something smooth that they can rub, right? But I want them to come back to the present, right? And so what I might ask are, what are like engaging the senses, right? What are 5 things that you see? What are 4 things that you hear? What are 3 things that you can feel? And they might, they touch the couch, they touch their jeans, and they rub their ring. And what are 2 things that you can smell? And I've learned as a function of doing this, sometimes I have like little bottles of different scents, like essential oils and stuff, so that they can have an option like, here, smell one of these. And then what's 1 thing that you can taste, right? And we're getting them to focus on their senses, pulling them from up here. They're in their head. I'm in my scary place. I'm in danger. And I'm pulling them down back to the present moment, right? And so that's sort of an in vivo experience where they got really overwhelmed. You got to see, as a clinician, you got to see what that was like. And they get to experience what it's like to pull themselves down. So a couple things. 1, they now know when I'm way up here and I'm triggered, everything's going, I can come back to the present moment. And it's not going to be perfect. They're not going to go from 10 to 0, but I will definitely take 10 to 3, right? They come down, they're feeling better. So they know that it's possible. It's not a foregone conclusion. If I get triggered, that's it. That's the end of the story. And then the other thing is teaching them this technique. And they hopefully would say, that worked for me, or I like this part. The tactile thing meant a lot. That was very helpful. And so then we're continuing to teach them to do that on their own, out in their everyday life in case they get triggered. That's all I've got for right now. Next time, we're going to go over the more cognitive stuff, right? What to do, how to do the cognitive processing, counseling, what to do when they have more intrusive thoughts, how to rectify things. So focusing on schemas and thoughts and things like that come about as a function of the trauma. So I'm going to wrap up here. I hope everyone's doing well. I hope everyone's staying healthy. Please let me know what you need. Take care, and I'll talk to you soon.